Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 9 of xAPI Cohort. I am Megan Torrance, your cohort host. I've got my cohort coffee and we are ready to rock. Actually, this is a giant oat milk mocha. So we are really ready to roll. I was just chatting backstage with Amy Parent, who is our guest speaker today. And Amy has been a part of Cohort since 2017. She found out about Cohort and xAPI at the DevLearn conference. She was saying, right, Sean Putnam and Janet Efron, our speaker from 2 weeks ago, had just released their book, Investigating Performance. And gosh, I think about where Cohort has come, where the specification, where our industry has come since then. This is really a story of maturation. The specification is maturing way beyond where it was in 2016, 2017. The size of the cohort is much, I think probably 8 times larger than it was when Amy first joined us. And the energy and the passion and the variety of projects and the new people that we welcome to this community just keeps, it's so uplifting and inspiring. And maybe it's the caffeine, maybe it's the fact that it's almost 70 degrees outside here in Michigan. Good morning, afternoon, or 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning in the Philippines. We've since had daylight savings time here in the United States, so our hours are shifted. So I don't know what time it is anywhere else in the world. But whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world, welcome. Welcome to Cohort, and I'm really excited for today's session. Well, I'll tell you in a minute why I'm excited for today's session. So let's get rolling. Here we are in week 9. It's supposed to be week 9. I didn't get my things updated. Darn. So we will get these updated before we send the slide deck out. But we are actually here. Let's just do it. 9, and it is March 17th. I just feel like I've done a proof of life thing after being kidnapped. That's okay. Mistakes are A-okay here at Cohort. That's how we learn. There are over 822 of you registered for the Spring xAPI Cohort, which is really exciting, right? This is really, really exciting. There we go, week 9. It's been a rough week, everybody. I'm glad that the sun is here. It is never too late to join Cohort. So please continue to share this with your network, share this with your colleagues in your teams. You reach out and you talk to somebody new on LinkedIn. You can tell them that you're a part of this. Building that network is huge. And actually, interestingly enough, I've been spending a lot of time this week working on a presentation I'm giving tomorrow at TLDC, which is the Learning and Development Community, or chat, or conversation, or depending on its iteration, it's something different, which is also really fun and exciting. But really looking at career stories and expectations, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about is the power of a fantastic network. That's what Cohort is all about. So your network gets stronger, your strategic network grows when you invite people to join yours and tap in. So I strongly recommend for your career that you do that. I also strongly recommend that if you've got time tomorrow, you sign in to the TLDC conference, and I will, or Jamie will, somebody will put a link in the chat to that too. It's a free conference, and Jamie's already got it. Seriously, having Jamie behind the scenes is kind of like having a fairy godmother when you are presenting. So that makes Jamie an amazing producer. Thank you very much, Jamie. Matt Cleaver is also got over a decade long of providing me with the relevant links and vocabulary words that I wanted to say in the moment. So Matt Cleaver, you will find him often in the Slack and providing all sorts of assistance and support, and as well as the very infrastructure that keeps Cohort moving. xAPI Gnome is our friend on Twitter, and actually my first xAPI design cohort, the star of our first project in using xAPI. So that was super fun. And today we've got Amy Parent from Salience Learning really talking about, right, the data story, right? Don't you have data? And some of you have data, Team More Than SCORM. I saw it. It's pretty awesome. It's beautiful. And you need to use it to tell the story, right? And so this is pretty powerful. As a reminder, unless somebody states otherwise, which no one has yet to my knowledge, all of your cohort projects and work are under the Apache 2.0 license, which basically means you can borrow each other's stuff, but you cannot sue each other for bad ideas. Good thing I do not have a career in law, because that is the simple version of it. xAPI party. May 6th, online. Jamie and I are already getting this going. You can sign up. There's already 65 people signed up, which is pretty amazing. Can I tell you, most of the xAPI parties we've hosted have had fewer than 50 people show up on the day. We've already got more than 65 signed up. So go ahead and sign up. Thank you, Jamie, for the link there. And hey, Jamie, can you also put the link to submit a proposal for party? Project teams. I'm talking to you. Please submit a proposal. I can guarantee you that the lady who picks the sessions for xAPI party will give you a pass. You have a guaranteed spot to show your work on May 6th to the world. And people come to this conference because they are curious about what you are doing. And even if you're not on a project team, or even if you're already submitting a project team one and you have something else you want to talk about, by all means, come and submit a regular session for the xAPI party. The more the merrier. We love the opportunity to showcase lots and lots of great ideas. Speaking of showcasing things, those of you who are giving your team updates for the week, this is your friendly reminder to make sure that your microphones and cameras are ready to rock and roll, which you can do while I talk about what Cohort is for the people who are newcomers this week, because chances are, if you are giving your update, you are not a newcomer this week to Cohort. So you may be a newcomer to Cohort. And one of the things that we have really worked very hard is to make Cohort a welcoming experience for everyone. A welcoming experience for everyone, regardless of your background, and regardless of your experience with xAPI or the concept of Cohort itself. So we want you to get up to speed quickly. So here's what we're doing here. Cohort is a free, virtual, vendor-neutral, 12-week learning by doing and project-based team learning experience and community. And every week I kind of zone in on a little piece of that description that's kind of moving me for the week. And I want to call out the 12-week opportunity here. This is basically a semester. If you think about it, right? We run this spring and fall. Think of it like a semester-long opportunity to soak in your learning, right? So spaced learning, it's that structure and the accountability to continue, especially those of you who are working on project teams, right? Project teams work in Slack and Zoom and GitHub and fingers on your keyboards. And then we have here the weekly web session where we invite in experts and practitioners to help us kind of craft the arc and that story that we can share with others. Jamie sends out a weekly email with updates, recordings of the web session, the PowerPoint deck. So yes, this is being recorded. It will be sent to you, or maybe you're listening to this on the recording. We got lots of recording action, by the way. But there's also extra goodies, and you only get that weekly email if you are actually signed up for Cohort. So if you're here live or on the recording and you're like, wow, I just found this, but how do I find more? How do I get this delivered to my inbox every week? That's how you do it. So go right ahead and you can sign up at xapicohort.com. This week, we are squarely in the, we're squarely in the realm of, right, building and tuning the ecosystem and actually seeing it in action, seeing live things. So this weekend, next week, you'll be seeing actual things going on in the actual real world, things that were not built in 12 weeks by a bunch of volunteers coming together and learn informally together, right? So these are our professional projects. In the last 2 weeks of Cohort, we will be looking at the team demos, which is exciting. And then we have the option for Demo Fest at Learning Solutions. So all of the teams right now, by the way, teams, if you're feeling like, wow, this is hard, I will just let you know, this is the part of the cohort where the energy kind of dips a little bit because you all have day jobs, especially with this job market these days, right? You have things going on and the weather's getting nice and you're going outside, or at least if you're in the northern half of the world, right? And so your life is taking over, work is taking over, and 12 weeks is a long time to commit, right? I'm proud of you for committing. I'm proud of you for being here. And as we start staring down those team demos and the xAPI party, this is when your team energy starts bumping back up. I watched this happen now, what, I don't know, 14 times now, Jamie, something like this, 12 times, 13 times, a lot. So this is when it's happening, So let's talk about all these demo opportunities, So March 31st and April 7th, I already have one team in my handy dandy list. One team signed up for a demo session on April 7th. So there are slots April 31st and 7th. Think of them about 10 to 15 minutes, maybe. Just a quick, what we've done, what we've learned. Here it is. See our data. That's a great opportunity for you. April 21st, who's going to DevLearn? Is there anybody going to DevLearn here? Go ahead and give me a thumbs up or a something if you're going to DevLearn. Not DevLearn, Learning Solutions. Give me a thumbs up if you're going to Learning Solutions. So at Learning Solutions, there is a Demo Fest category for cohort projects. So I know at least one's been submitted. I'm pretty excited about that. And then the xAPI party, which we talked about, that's basically, we call it party. It's actually a conference. That will be May 6th here online in AirMeet. And project teams will have either a half session of 20 minutes or 45-minute session if you want to demo your work. So there's some cool stuff going on there. You want to come back. But I am going to invite to join Cohort today in the web session, Amy Parent. Like I said, Amy and I figured out she's been somewhere around Cohort since 2017, which is pretty amazing that you have come back semester after semester after semester. And actually, not to embarrass you, but I've been waiting for this presentation because I know you're doing some cool work. And I've been excited to see, and you put me off once, but that's okay. That's okay. And so I'm actually really excited to see what you've got today, and to hear about how you use data to pull it all together. But Amy, do me a favor. First, we were talking backstage about just kind of like your experience with Cohort, right? So tell everybody else that story.
Yeah, so I learned about Cohort. First of all, I learned about xAPI coming out of DevLearn. I think it was 2016. I was working for a company called Grovo. Microlearning was their focus. I came back and I was like, oh, xAPI, one of all the developers, and they looked at me weird. And I discovered the Cohort and joined, I think it must have been the spring of 2017. And that was the year where I got exposed to Sean Putnam and Janet Efron's book on how they looked at data analysis. It was maybe 100 people, I think less. And we were doing projects like, how to send a statement from we couldn't even use the development tools then. You couldn't even get behind like Articulate, to do this sort of thing. So we were like, how to send a statement from an app that we're going to build, or a browser extension, which was the team that I was on. So yeah, it's been a really fun journey. And I've been showing up ever since. Sometimes I have the time to get active. A lot of times I lurk, and I always come to these presentations because I always learn something of value.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see what you're going to share today.
Yeah,
So
so
I'm gonna get out of your way.
no problem. Let me share. You're more than welcome to stay. Let's see here.
How about I'll just hang out on the edge.
Awesome. And also, I encourage you to interact in this. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the moment, and Jamie and Megan will bring them forward, and we can go from there. So as you know, I'm Amy Parent. Been playing around with xAPI and Cohort for a while. To be honest with you, I haven't actually had the opportunity to really start using the xAPI data with intent up until the last 3 years. And so in doing so and in having that experience with Cohort, I've collected some resources that I have found to be valuable in trying to do this. So you'll notice investigating performance is up there, but also the L10 model. This is a book that I picked up out of a session, xAPI Camp at DevLearn one year. And also some work that I was following from Ben Betts out of Learning Pool, who was also an early participant in xAPI. So before I kind of show you what we've been doing with data and what we're exploring with xAPI data, I think it's important that I show you how we decided what data we were going to use and why we decided that. And that's where those resources really came in value for me. The first thing we decided at Salience Learning and in our approach is we really wanted to take this from a holistic approach. We weren't going to just try and rely on one type of data or one source of data. And we were going to do our best to pull data from different sources and around these categories: engagement, knowledge, skills, attitude, performance, and of course, impact. All in the spirit of the L10 model, if you will. Of course, once you've done that, then we need to define exactly, what we're going to try and measure in each of these areas. And this is where I found some of the work that Ben Betts had been exploring with kind of a data canvas map, if you will. We developed a couple of hypotheses. We took like a scientific approach around it just to kind of get our bearings and why we were doing this and what we wanted to find out around each of these. And at Salience Learning, we're really exploring, combining that social learning along with really good practice in the design of learning. And we felt that that was a place where we could look and see if we discover any interesting patterns or correlations around engagement. And then when we look at knowledge, skills, and attitude, of course, we're looking to see, have we seen any shifts? Have we seen any gains? Where are we continuing to see gaps? And in particular, we wanted to look at that through performance and scenarios, pre and post tests, and one of our known tools in learning design called if-then plans or implementation intention plans, which we call microplans. And then finally, the ultimate in, learning, which is the transfer of that behavior or seeing those learned behaviors or skills actually being used. And again, here we wanted to see how are the microplans influencing that, and where are we also seeing that influence show up in the discussions? Are people just reflecting and processing in those discussions, or are they actually sharing stories of use? So we wanted to see, use the data in that way. This, of course, when we take this approach, it actually sets us up to look at the data underneath all of that. And we then went through a process of defining that quite specifically. So for each hypothesis, what are the key questions in there? Where can we find that data? How are we going to actually query it? How are we going to pull it out? And then what are some ways that we could start to visualize that? This, I find, becomes a really important compass, because what can happen, at least for me, is all this data starts coming in and it can be really disorienting, and very distracting. You can go down rabbit holes and start to go down pathways of I wonder and explore. But this always grounds me because this was my plan, and it allows me to interact and pull and query that data really, really fast. The next thing, and I picked this up most recently, in the cohort specifically, I don't remember who presented, but Megan, you've emphasized this a few times about the importance of visualizing that data a little bit. I think it is important because it also helps communicate. At least it's helped me communicate the plan to others who aren't quite as in the weeds as I am around this. So you can start to see a dashboard effect, if you will, which is where a lot of people are right now. But also gives you a sense of what level of analysis you're committing yourself to, which is good to know ahead of time. This engagement data is probably the easiest stuff and the quickest stuff for us to pull. It's numbers, it's quantitative. But as we start to unpack the knowledge and the skills and the attitude data, we actually want to make sure that we're adding some depth. So we start mixing in some of the quantitative with the qualitative. And I think this is really important to understand going in so that you can actually build this data output into your learning, right? So you have to know what you want to get out of it so that you know what to build, especially with xAPI. And then finally, when we start getting up into the higher realms of L10, if you will, really looking at behavior change, behavior transfer of learning, you're really getting into a lot of anecdotal and qualitative evidence, at least in the approach that we've taken. And rich data, but again, thoughtfully thinking about how do we build this into learning experience, and we don't rely on a more traditional approach that we may or may not have access to, which could be observations, performance coaching conversations, things of that nature, which in our position we don't have access to. So I wanted, before I shared with you what data we're using in the story that we're trying to tell and how we're approaching that, I wanted to show you how we got there. The interesting thing is, while we intentionally architected this, right, the truth of the matter is, and what is important to always keep in mind, is to be open-minded to the data and allow the story to actually tell itself in the data. Into intentionally architecting it is important so that you at least have the data to look at. So I wanted to pause for a second before we move forward and have you engage in the chat and tell me a little bit about, from a learner's perspective, if you were a learner and you knew that data was going to be shared with you. I am curious to hear what kind of data you would want to have tracked or know about your own learning. So if you wouldn't mind chatting that in, and I'll move my window out of the way here.
Amy, while people type in the answers here to what they'd want to learn about their own data, one of the things I can think of is I'd like to know if I'm hitting the mark. Am I meeting expectations?
Yeah. And I would ask you to think about that even further. What could that look like for you? What would be your evidence? What would you put back in return?
Yeah, I'd love to know. I'd like to have clear visibility to the rubric, right? To what evidence is relevant. I'd like to be able to compare what I'm putting in with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, that's cool. Oh, we're getting lots of great answers. So everything from tracking completion to what competencies I've mastered and how well. How do I pair with my peers in both completion and performance, right?
Mm.
So two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm not doing well in, what do I know that my peers don't? What do my peers know that I don't? Ooh, how often do I need to hear something until I can finally apply it? I got teenagers, right? It takes a lot of repetition before they actually apply things. What kind of subjects do I need to know? Right? And like, what's next? Some good stuff. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I think it's important to ask this question is because there is an audience for xAPI that is the learner. And I think it's an opportunity that I know I haven't personally fully lived into yet, but I'm really eager to explore. We get our dashboards and LMSs. We might get, clues, through other things in the learning, like, quiz reports or, feedback on a scenario answer. But holistically, I don't know that we really have anything super strong yet that tells us all of this, on an ongoing basis. So the other question, of course, is you saw our approach, you saw some of our hypotheses and where we're starting to dive in. The flip side of that is for a different audience, and it's about what would you want to know about your learning program? And you can fill in the blank, as a exec level leader, as a manager, as an L&D professional, as a developer who's building all of this, as an instructional designer. And I think you can see there are similarities, but there's also differences. And I think that's important as you're thinking about your approach. Thanks for entertaining me with that question. That was a lot of fun. So now I'm going to show you what we've been doing, what we're trying to do. And as I show you this data that we've collected and what it actually looks like, you'll also notice I put it in our storytelling structure, if you will. And I'll point that out as we go through. So it's trying to share data, but share data in a way that tells a story. So my very first attempts at doing this, it was not with Salience Learning, it was with a different company. And at the time we were using the LRS analytics, and we were using a different LXP or learning experience platform that was xAPI, conformant and supportive. And we started with engagement activity as one of those moments, and it measured engagement, in this case, by the number of statements. And of course, that could be anything, whatever the platform could generate as an xAPI statement was caught here. But what was really cool about this high level and collective data is that it actually gave us an opportunity to start to explore patterns. And you can see that, the activity ebbs and flows. So then the very natural question is, when does it ebb and flow? Why does it ebb and flow? So this is very much an exploratory approach to data. We didn't really know what we needed. And as we got to understand the data better, this was one of the things that led to those questions. Today at Salience Learning, we have run some programs. We're finished running up a couple of programs on an LMS that actually doesn't generate xAPI data. But the cool part was the data that it did have in behind the scenes that we could actually get our hands on could help us mimic some of that activity. And that's what this first graph is about. It measures engagement and activity in the form of number of visits. But again, we still get that ebb and flow, rise and peaks and lulls in the activity, and we're still able to start to explore those questions. Future state is below, where we're moving to a platform that is xAPI supportive, and it does generate statements from both the objects and the LMS itself, which is cool. And that means I can actually start to investigate different kinds of activity. And here's an example that I've been playing around with in terms of course views. And we can see, how course views change over time with this kind of a view. So what's the point of looking at this kind of data? Well, the story that we could tell is what we overlie, what we put over the top of it. This is an example of one of our programs that we're running currently with an organization, and we have two different additional data points overlapping this activity data. The arrows are of strategy we're using called nudge emails. It's kind of like your notifications that kind of remind you, hey, you haven't been in here a while, come on back in. Of course, we use a different approach than that, and they can come from both the platform and the client sponsor themselves. And what we can discover here is whether or not this is a strategy that has influence on bringing people back into their learning, because we're running long programs here. We're trying to space learning and help learners pace their learning over time, and the nudge emails are one of our strategies. At the same time, this organization also is trying to instill an environment of continuous learning and self-regulated learning. And they put in a policy on Fridays to be Learning Fridays, and a certain time frame where meetings that are business meetings or things like that are discouraged. And so the stars represent when the Fridays are happening. And the question is, are people doing their learning on Fridays more than not? And one of the interesting kind of takeaways, insights in this data is, well, perhaps not in the beginning, but when we actually reinforced that policy using the nudge emails, we actually are starting to see that Fridays are becoming the popular engagement. So it's an interesting use case and way to use data to empower and push something forward that around a learning environment, in this case, that you're trying to make happen. I thought this was fun. This is the same program. This is at a different organization, but it tells a very different story. It's also a very different organization, and it's a very different audience. The audience prior, the one that we just looked at, it's an audience that has higher degrees. They're very experienced people. The work that they do requires a lot of it's very technical, it's very scientific. So they have a very different set of pressures and work environment that they're in. This organization, and also that audience was varied in that it was made up of individual contributors and different levels of leaders. This audience is all leaders, frontline level leaders. So they're a little bit new to leadership, a couple years in maybe. They're in the commercial side of this organization and coming up from being, I guess you would say, maybe like a sales representative or sales professional. So again, very different audience, very different work environment. And so we took a different strategy. This was a blended learning approach, whereas the one that you just saw before was fully asynchronous. And what was really interesting here is that the VILT, the blended learning session that we held for one of the courses, we haven't seen any activity after that. And so it opens up a whole bunch of different questions, and especially when you compare that against what kind of activity we were seeing right up until the beginning and the end. And also how much less the nudge email actually had on this audience. So really two different stories, two different lessons that we're able to learn from here. I just want to pause for a second and point out the storytelling side of the slide and the one before. We're using this strategy of the main insight, telling the story in the title, but then sharing the insight through highlighting parts of the data, and then also explaining the position or the insight and interpretation down here at the bottom. So we're still working on that. In terms of engagement, we again also looked at the discussion activity, and this is straight up, number of posts kind of numbers. Again, the same organization, came in really strong, lots of engagement and sharing some of the basic stuff around goals and reflections. But some of the other levels of engagement was much, much lower than what we would have expected. So it does also match the story that was told before in terms of the peaks and the valleys that we're seeing in activity. This, in contrast to this level of engagement in social learning. So if I had to share any kind of takeaway from just this engagement data, it varies greatly, and there's a lot that informs it, which once again, you have to take a look at some of the other data to really, and the context and the audience to really get a solid point of view and insight around this. This is all xAPI generated, and we queried this out of the Learning Locker was the LRS and the LXP. And then finally, looking at engagement, and our hypothesis was also how does this correlate, if at all, with completions. The story holds true with activity. That one cohort we ran, 2 separate cohorts for that organization. The first time we ran it, we saw the scramble of, cramming learning in at the very end. We kind of saw that same sort of pattern play out again. And so we really want to, look at continuous learning, that audience and learning strategy a little bit more closely. As opposed to the other organization with, the varied users, the asynchronous delivery, we are seeing more of a paced and spaced learning approach, which is what we're promoting and trying to encourage with those nudge emails. And then it will be, I've gone the wrong direction. It'll be determined to see, how this continues, because we did hit a little bit of a flat line. The story will continue to unfold. So before I move on to this next set of data, is any questions or insights that are popping up for people around how we took our engagement hypothesis and plan and put it into action so far?
Amy, I'm going to bring a question on stage. Suzanne asked earlier, but since you just showed a whole bunch more graphs, this was earlier when you were showing your dashboards, multiple graphs on a page, and then you just showed these. And Suzanne's question is, can you walk us through, or maybe it's Susan, and so I apologize if I am completely mispronouncing your name. Can you walk us through more specifically how you are analyzing the data? And I think there's 2 or 3 different directions you can take that, but go for it.
Yeah, so let me maybe go to one of the graphs to help answer that. So let's start with this graph. This graph was in the LMS, we could set some parameters for what data we wanted to bring to the surface, and then we could export it in a CSV file. And so we basically brought the data into Excel. We did a little bit of cleanup and reorganizing of the data and then visualized it. So this was actually pretty simple to build. It gave us the timestamp data. It gave us, and then I will say I did have to add in a count. I had to use a little Excel savviness to, count if, so I could get the actual number of visits per day. Otherwise, it was just a bunch of timestamp data, and it was segregated by IDs as the identifier. Let's see, what else can I show you quickly? So that's been the approach for all of these. This one, again, it was really just we looked at each one of the discussion topics, and we were able to export how many posts were made. Again, clean up a little bit of, the things that weren't actually posts, but were being counted as posts, and then just did a Excel analysis. This I was actually able to do in Learning Locker. So the pluses and minuses. So in Learning Locker, I can't quite clean the data as well. It's not really designed to do that. I can query the data and I can bring some rough visualizations forward, but I can't guarantee you that there's no noise in this data, meaning, my own activity is in that data, simply because I'm in there. So this is a visualization out of Learning Locker. And then this one, again, was data that was exported out of the LMS. I will pause and say that this data, this too, can actually be exported out of the LRS, and you can bring it into any kind of BI tool or something as simple as Excel. Does that help answer the question a bit?
I think so. I think that's super helpful. And you've also called out subtly, but called out the value of data cleaning and simply being aware enough of your data to know where it might be dirty.
Yeah. Or noisy.
Noisy, that feels better. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, this gets into some different types of analysis, because at this point we're getting into some qualitative data. And this is where actually knowing what data you want becomes important, because it informs what you built. This is an example of a part of a micro plan that we built in our development tool. We are using Domino 1. And basically what happens here is someone writes in what their plan's going to be, and when they hit the next button, we wrote in that a xAPI statement will be generated, and what it generates is what is put into this input field, and you can see it right here. So I just ran this really quickly in StormCloud so that you guys could see how that worked. And so once you have that data, then you can query for it in your LRS, and you can do all kinds of interesting analysis around it. A really simple analysis we did for this one client was we looked at the microplans that actually got submitted, and here are a few of them, and we compared them against the self-reported microplans in the VILT. This is what I picked. So this gives us an idea of how, what people said they did, what they said they were going to practice, and we can further analyze that with doing something as simple as, how many instances of this word do we see show up? So this one is actually a combination of goals and micro plans. We had the hypothesis that goals will be really, really broad. There'll be like things like, I want to be a better critical thinker, or I want to learn more how to use this with my teams, and then as we got into micro plans, they get really, really specific, and they actually start focusing on a behavior or skill that they want to work on. And we did see that. And this is the kind of analysis that I'm really just getting into right now. And this was my first attempt at going in this direction. So stay tuned. There will be more to come. And I think that's the right time for me to start wrapping this up. We're just getting started with how to use xAPI and other data sources to help us talk about learning. And when I just this week started sharing a little bit of this story that I put together for one of our clients with some internal folks, and it's a real shift. I mean, people are excited about the data, but there's still a little bit of a safety to go back to the dashboard stuff, because so far it's new to look at this kind of data in this kind of form for some people. So it's a really interesting journey. I'm really having fun figuring it out, and I'm also learning a lot as we go through it. So I'd love to hear any insights or connections that you're making, and more questions.
Fantastic. Amy, you know what? My parents always said, good things come to those who wait. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. And you were right. It was great to get the actual data and see how far you've taken this work. So this is fantastic. I'm going to let questions come in to the chat, let you field questions in the chat there. And I'm going to get to team updates.
Okay.
So teams, as you have an update to do, go ahead and raise your hand so Jamie can scoop you up and bring you in. And we're going to share the screen here because we have teams doing stuff. Even though I said this is kind of that slow period of cohort, and it is, it's that slow period. It happens. It's normal. Don't worry about it. You can actually, by the way, still start a new team if you want to. So go right ahead. And that's totally cool too. If you are looking for a team, you can browse channels and look for things that start with the prefix of super earth-shattering prefix team. And that will be where you can go to find what's going on and what projects might be in play. I am going to see, Martin, are you here today? I know that the team has had a hard time, everybody all getting together, but I didn't know if Martin was here to be able to give us a quick update. I know that he did get a prototype desktop application running and or working on getting it running to be able to support and launch the Catapult player. Because I see Jamie, I'm guessing Jamie's here to say that, oh, and Liz says, nope, Martin is traveling. All right. So next up then is team data analytics. The team is, and I'm not sure if anybody's here this week to do the update. Go ahead and raise their hand. In Slack, there's a couple of things going on. One is a list of data that the team is looking for, including, although I think that looks like they're going to be able to get some employee data from a source that would be able to reliably de-ID it, so de-identify it, so that we're not looking at actual employee information. Well, actual information, but not tied to actual people. But then also taking a step back, and I love the two different ways this team's going right now, right? One is to like, we need some data because we want to analyze it. And the other is to say, what do we want to find out? What are our questions? And it really connects back to Amy's session, right? What do I want to know about my program? And then how do I engineer that in order to get the data for it? So I thought that was a really cool option. Team H5P, I scooped up this status and was not sure if Shauna was here today to be able to give us an update. I do see Shauna here today. Shauna, do you want to come on stage and give your team's update? Or the team's update? Shauna, we see your mic enabled.
Hi, how are you?
We got you. We are doing great and glad to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, sorry, I was having a little bit of trouble connecting for a second there. Yeah, so we've been working together as a group, and we've been working on setting up actually a plugin for WordPress to use for H5P, but there's some security issues around it. So we were kind of trying to open it up to other people who may want to join our group to help configure the plugin. We have one that's already working, but we just want to make sure it's a little bit more secure. So we're working on that and looking at different ways that maybe we could encrypt it. And then we're also experimenting with some new H5P activities that they've added recently, which include AR that weren't previously available.
Very, very cool. So are you getting the H5P or the plugin support you need, or are you still looking for plugin support?
we could definitely benefit from some plugin support. If anybody wants to jump in on that, we would all appreciate it, I think. It's kind of out of the wheelhouse for the people who are the members of the group. But we do have a working plugin. We do need to configure it for it to be more safe, so that it doesn't expose any user data.
Awesome. Okay. Well, cool. Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing the rest of the updates.
Sounds good. So way to go, Team H5P. Team LTEM is, there we go, Team LTEM. They took advantage of the $1 GrassBlade LRS offer that is listed in the demos and vendor offers. So yay, team, way to take advantage of that, and are working on getting things set up there. And of course, we heard lots about LTEM metrics from Amy today. So I love how all of this, the synchronicity is coming together. Mary Elizabeth, you have data. Where's Christina giving the update? Christina's giving the update. Oh, and
Hi. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm giving the update on behalf of Mary Elizabeth for today. And you can see we filled up the page on our updates. Essentially, what we're doing is just testing at this moment. And we've come up with different ways of how we want, as you can see, the storyline to proceed and be published, and just trying to see what works and what doesn't. We discovered that Bridge didn't exactly work the way that we had hoped. And so we're just in the process of testing the information and making sure that xAPI data is doing what we're hoping and, trying to make it do. And we're just going to continue in that state for a little bit as we try to, refine what it is, but that's what we're working on at the moment.
Super cool. Way to go. And I just want to, I get super excited. You've got data. Yay!
Yes.
It's alive.
Little by little, we're making way.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Christina.
Of course. Thank you.
Fantastic. See, I get very excited about these things, right? And I know you do too, right? That's actually why you're here. Team Personalized Learning is, I don't think Dominic is here. Is Dominic here?
I don't see.
Does not. Okay. So Team Personalized Learning had a couple weeks ago gotten some progress made, actually connecting in, or working to connect in pieces and parts, and that's that point, right? That it's alive stage that is exciting to get to. Team Storyline Beginner, bring your own project. No new news this week, but if you are looking to get in and do something and kind of work in parallel play mode alongside of others, this is a good spot to be. This group has posted a lot of good resources in their Slack channel. There's a lot of support. And if you were to find your way there and do something, you would likely find somebody who'd say, ooh, I'm interested in that. So that's a good place to get started if you are looking at the last, you still have 4 weeks left of cohort. So there's some opportunity here. Team Unreal Engine is doing some cool stuff. And also, that's right, if you were into jumping in on a slightly more technical basis than Storyline, this is a place to get in there. As the folks are looking at getting things going. And then Mark let me know that he is working on some really interesting and hopefully demoable developer tools. So Mark will have something for demo days here in Cohort, and then also for xAPI Party. And the folks who are in his Slack channel are kind of following along. So that's some pretty cool stuff too. That's our team updates for the week. So remember, it's never too late to join Cohort. Keep coming and invite your colleagues. That also puts you on the list to be personally invited to the xAPI party. If you like me, were raised right? You don't invite yourself somewhere. Consider yourself invited, but we will also invite that mailing list. Follow the xAPI Gnome. You can join us here for weekly web sessions or weekly web recordings. We'll see you at the party. We will hopefully see you at Learning Solutions Conference, at Demo Fest. I'm super excited for this. And then if you need help, you can catch us at xAPI Cohort at torrancelearning.com, or just find Jamie or Matt or I in the Slack channel. All right, everybody out there, get out there and make something cool this week. Have a great week. Thanks, everybody.